Welcome to Black and Gold Digital Edition, a behind-the-scenes look at your Pittsburgh Steelers.
Hi, and welcome to Week 15 on our digital show. I'm Jay Puskar alongside Mike Fenner and Kent Urbanski. And gentlemen, it's been a disappointing month of December so far for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They lose their second straight game, this one on the heels of a Sunday night loss up in Buffalo to a very good, if not a first-place team in the Buffalo Bills. And Kent, what did you take away from a contest where it just seems like the offense is sputtering and the rash of injuries is really starting to plague the defense?
Right, living on the edge, like I said before, but it doesn't mean the end of the world for this team. It just means they lost a game, and a game that I thought was a little tighter than what the score looks like. You take away the pick six that's right before the half, and it's a much tighter game. And I think even if you catch some of those passes that they're not dropping, could have changed the complexion of that game. So no reason to panic. The injury bug is hitting this team pretty hard. It's how they can respond and recover from that. There's time. And, Buffalo was a good team. I think a lot of people didn't give the Steelers a chance going up there to win, and I think they came out, played really hard in that first half. They just couldn't match it. Buffalo's intensity, and they're adjusting to the Steelers playing in the second half, and they come out with a loss. But there's no reason to panic.
And Mike, catching the football continues to be an issue for the Steelers wide receivers, especially for Deontay Johnson. I mean, that was really the theme for the first half, especially during the broadcast. And on the other side of it, the secondary just didn't look very well because Joe Hayden was out of the mix. That secondary really got carved up against Josh Allen.
Yeah, when it comes to the wide receivers, the drops have been frustrating, but plain and simple, once they catch the ball, if they catch the ball, they're capable of making as many plays or as big a plays as any receiving core pretty much across the league. They're so talented. It's just you got to get the hands on it, bring it in, and then make the play. And then defensively, the injuries piling up, the secondary having its issues along with that. But again, just like the offense having a tough time with only putting up 224 yards, give Buffalo's defense credit. And then on the other side, this Buffalo offense has been really impressive all season long, with the exception of maybe one or two games, Kansas City and another week where they struggle a little bit. But both units, this Buffalo team's for real. This is a really impressive team on paper. They showed it in prime time again, and it's not a huge loss to be super ashamed of. It's just not a great time to have back-to-back losses in December, of course. But they'll regroup and we'll see what they can do.
And Kent, this matchup was almost a playoff preview too. You're looking at two teams that are already bound for the postseason. It's just a matter of seeding. And in Buffalo's case, they're trying to lock up their first division championship in 25 years. But the Steelers, like Ben Roethlisberger said in his postgame, there's no need to push the panic button just yet. They're going to be fine. And boy, you look at the schedule, the Cincinnati Bengals are on the horizon. It couldn't have come at a better time.
Well, right, and like I said, there is no reason to panic. They have 3 games left. I think if they win the next one, they've already solidified their playoff spot, and it's just where the seeding is going to be. So you go to Cincinnati, you don't, you take that game serious, and you come out of there with a win. You don't screw around there, and then you got a home game against Indianapolis. That's a good football team as well, and they're going to come in and they're going to test the Steelers, especially with that defense of theirs. Then you finish up with Cleveland. I'm just hoping by the time it gets to that game that it's not one that the Steelers need for playoff seeding and that they can rest some people.
Mike, how important is it for the Steelers to get off to a good start Monday night? They know that they're playing a team that only has 2 wins on the season. It's a divisional foe, but they can't give any sort of hope for Cincinnati to pull off a major upset on their home field.
Yeah, they can't turn the ball over. They can't give short fields. I feel like we're doing a re-rack from the Dallas game earlier this year, which that almost came to fruition for the Cowboys because of those things, because of turnovers, short field, special teams. Those are the elements you got to take care of. Those are the X's and O's. But you're going up against a Brandon Allen-led team. They have Ryan Finley. Those are their options at quarterback without Joe Burrow. It's disappointing not to get to see that matchup again because he has really shown some flashes of greatness this year and had a few moments in the first Pittsburgh game. Of course, the Steelers won comfortably in that first matchup at Heinz Field. But, yeah, this is a Cincinnati team that's also depleted in terms of roster. They have not had Joe Mixon for a couple months now, I think, and Giovanni Bernard's now kind of out of the mix at running back. They're going with Samaje Perine. They've got some other options there, Travion Williams. So And the receivers still pose a threat, so the secondary definitely is going to have to play its part. But I think if they can create pressure on Brandon Allen, that will kind of equalize the guys like Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, A.J. Green, and Drew Sample as the pass-catching options.
Ken, for the last couple of weeks, everyone's been targeting the running game for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it seems like, especially after the Sunday night game, they made a conscious effort to get guys the ball out of the backfield. How can they finally get some production, though, because the yardage just isn't there? They're getting the carries, but they're just not producing.
You can't abandon the run. You have, if you're going to try to establish it, then you have to stay with it. You know, you can't give somebody the ball and he runs for 9 yards and then throw the ball 4 or 5 straight times after that. You got to be consistent with it and get that offensive line to get comfortable in run blocking and not so much pass blocking, and I think they'll be fine. And maybe this next game, the next couple of games, helps them do that.
And Mike, it was kind of brought to my attention too, and even watching the game on Sunday, it seems like TJ Watt is also on a snaps count all of a sudden because of just the injuries that have plagued the linebacking core. And he's their best player, at least from that linebacking core and beyond in that secondary. And is that basically playing with fire right now, trying to pick your spots and put Watt out there?
Well, yeah, I would think the last couple of weeks they have to be more careful with doing that, but it can come back to bite you not having him on the field as much. I would hope in a matchup like this that he can get the help he needs to not have to play a ton of snaps, and you can kind of save those reps for the final 2 games of the year and for the postseason. But it is kind of a concern that you're not able to get him out there as much as you'd like because you can't afford to lose him. You can't afford to lose him, Cam Hayward, Minka Fitzpatrick. There are others on this defense, but they've already lost a lot of really important pieces, some for the season, some in stretches. So it's a guy that you cannot afford to lose this guy because he's, like you said, their most impactful player, arguably on the entire team other than Ben Roethlisberger, and probably a heavy candidate to win Defensive Player of the Year.
And he needs to be on the field for critical downs. I mean, against the Bills. I mean, he was on the sidelines for two Bills scores. So
that's right.
He needs to be on the field when it counts. And I think teams are doubling up. If you watch the Bills game, they doubled up on him a lot, you know, knowing that there was no Bud Dupree on the other side. So, and that takes its toll on a guy to not have to deal with only one guy, but deal with 2. So, against these next couple opponents coming up, you know, I think that using him in certain situations that are key situation downs is what's important.
Finally, guys, in the spirit of the holidays, what is your Christmas wish for the Pittsburgh Steelers or in the NFL in general?
Well, for me, I think it's just for this team to get healthy, to get some players back that are, you know, like the Joe Haydens and Spillanes that are on that defense that made that defense tough to score against. So that's for me is what my biggest wish is. And for them to get a more balanced attack on offense so Ben's not throwing the ball 50 times, especially in cold weather where that arm's probably, you know, has been tested enough. I think he needs a break from that, and I'd like to see him throwing the ball less and them trying to run the ball more with some of these running backs committee, whether it's a committee or whether it's one guy. I mean, they need to try to establish some sort of a run. They're not going to be 100. They're not going to change things overnight and be 100-yard, get a guy running for 100 yards. But even if they get around that 60 to 75 yards in a game, I'm happy with that.
Mike, what about you?
I'll give you one for Pittsburgh and one for the league. For the league, I kind of want to see a playoff matchup where it's a regional matchup, either Pittsburgh-Buffalo or Pittsburgh-Cleveland. I want to see that in the postseason.
Yeah, so
I think that would be a lot of fun. It's something we haven't seen in a while. That's my NFL wish. And then for Steelers, better offensive line play. I mean, don't get me wrong, they've had a ton of injuries, but it's something that I think a lot of people have kind of neglected to go after this year. A lot of people want to blame the running back play, the drops of the receiver, sometimes Ben Roethlisberger, but you know, think about where this offensive line has been the last couple of years to where it is this year. It's a lot different. You lose Zach Banner in the opener against the Giants for the season. Matt Filer currently on injured reserve. You've had Marquise Pouncey in and out. You've had Dotson rotating in there. You lost Ramon Foster to retirement last year. There's been a lot of shuffling on this offensive line when you compare it to maybe the last 5 years compared to this year. It's just, I wish that we could get some better play out of the offensive line to be able to run the ball, pass protect better, and easier said than done. And of course, they have those excuses built in with the injuries, the COVID list things, etc. But I think that's a problem that hasn't been talked about enough for this team.
All right, guys, as always, nicely done, and we'll talk to you next week. So for Mike Fenner, Kent Urbanski, I'm Jay Puskar. Thanks for tuning in. Happy holidays to everybody, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for watching. Join us again next week for Black and Gold Digital Edition.